皆さん、こんばんは。
Good evening, everyone. So I'm Senior Executive Officer in charge of Service Development. I am Ikebe. Well, thank you for coming to Line Developer Day. And I sincerely hope you enjoyed today's session. So we started at 10 a.m. today. Usually it be a little bit too early for software engineers, so you might be a little bit tired. So, but this is the final session, so I sincerely hope you stay at the very end. So this is the photo we took today. So already, and today's developer day, so we tried a lot of new things. So you use the line just to check in for today's event. So for participant account, already you received the URL which can redirect you to presentation material sites. So if there are any session you are unable to attend because of the concurrent session, so please access this site to take a look at the presentation materials. So we had a two concurrent track, and so we covered 17 topics. When we were preparing that, we had 50 candidate talks, and we narrowed down to 17. So as a selection criteria, so you can see that we are the tech focus. So we wanted to cover the area of focus. And one is a technology for large-scale platform, and second, augmented and mixed reality in daily life. Thirdly, we have a big data. So we wanted to talk about real-time big data analysis and machine learning. And we have a plan to do a lot of things in this three area. So out of 50 topics, and again, there are certain topics we couldn't cover today, so we'd like to post this information in the engineer's blog and some other media. So those of you who have a plan to attend the reception parties, so please give your feedback or ask questions to line staff. So going into my main topic. Well, rather than talking about hardcore technology area, but I'd like to look at the situation from a different perspective, which is our working environment for engineers and also the culture. That's a topic I'd like to talk about. First of all, I will talk about the working environment and culture. And finally, we have a lot of developers in our audience. So I'd like to talk about future direction with respect to line development organization. So when I talk about working environment and culture, for line engineers, you can see the number of the icons in front of you. Center, you can see the line icon. In addition to that, we released the number of other applications, B612. So we have a lot of users for selfie, and there's a lot of users for that. Number of application and also for the product scale. So these are on the increasing trend. So I'd like to give you some figure. So we use a GitHub Enterprise, and so 2012 we implemented this solution. This is the latest repository, so that's more than 10,000. So this is the number of repository. So iOS, Android, separate repository, and so that we have a separate repository, one for server, the other client. We have some common module for multiple projects. As discussed, we are introducing the microservice in our environment. So we tend to have a more repository compared to the number of the products. As you can see, that there's a lot of activity we have to do internally. So, as I mentioned, we have a lot of development tasks. Because of that, we increase the number of engineers every year. So, some engineers work in this Shibuya Hikarie office, and we have a Fukuoka branch overseas, as you can see. China, Korea, Taiwan, Japan, and Thailand, Indonesia are the overseas location. And we currently place a strategic focus in Thailand and Indonesia. And we're pretty active recruiting the engineers here in Japan and outside of Japan. So we like to increase the number of engineers continuously. And we have a lot of engineers from overseas development organization today for this Developers Day. So speaking of the line, so we use the single binary as a messenger applications. But at the same time, in addition to that, we offer that local specific service to make it suitable for each country. So if you look at the stamp, so you can see that stamp which are only available here in Japan, but outside of Japan, so you can see that unique stamp. And also we include the essence of the local event. So because of the different culture in each country, and also in the whole B and Taiwan representative made a presentation. There are services only released in Thailand and Taiwan. One example, if you look at the left upper section and the green color, well, green man is passing something to women. And this is the delivery service in Thailand. We call it Line Man. And for this line hack, this is the hackathon event we held in Thailand. So again, we hold the unique event in each country. Speaking of engineering, if we consider engineering efficiency and also for the operations, of course, just to create something as a global standard and run that in the global platform, I know that this is the best. However, we don't think everything works using this way, because we have to really understand the unique culture of each country, and we have to develop this service in accordance with that. In addition to simple localization, and we have to deepen our understanding of each country's culture, and we have to use the local resource who understand that local culture most. So we call it culturalized. So culturalized approach is the one thing we value in our organizations. So speaking of the development organization for product, some project is closed loop in each office, and one in Korea, the one in Japan. Also, we have some that international team working on a single project. So we have a mixture of both. So we try to remain flexible for this project management and organizations.
ですね。まあ、
So line developers, the office are dispersed in many locations, but the teams from different countries work together a lot. For example, take authentication, for example, or payment. these are factors which is used in many services. So that team might be right next to you or beyond the ocean. And a very convenient library module which was developed for a certain product might be used by other teams. Since this is a microservice, this Microsoft service, so it's like loosely coupled where a microservice is developed in a certain location while the other microservice is developed in another location, and they work very closely together. And when I talked about this outside, I receive questions. How do you overcome the language barriers? That is a very common question I get. And of course, today some overseas speakers made presentations in Japanese, so there are many non-Japanese people who can speak Japanese, while English is sometimes used as a common global language. And the company has a system to offer language training. However, in situations, and depending on situations, in this meeting, for example, we have a dedicated interpreters team who will help and assist to overcome these language barriers at teleconference type of situations. But it's too costly to use interpreters all the time. So for very one-to-one type of discussions during development, these types of communications, we use Line, which is our own service, as well as bot. It's a translation bot which has been here for a long time. This is something that we developed and which we wanted to use. So if we use these translation bots, people who have not used it before think it is wonder whether that is possible to do work with such bots. But there are little things that we take care of. For example, we don't use Keigo, which is speaking differently depending on the social position of that person, and also using more simple language and not using katakana, Japanese characters, but Roman characters instead. So basically, we're all engineers, so we share the same understanding, and actually the communication is working quite well. So we utilize multiple tools to do communications. We work on this. But having said that, what is the most important is to see each other face to face, to really stand next to each other and looking at the same code. They tend to be able to communicate with each other perfectly because they're both engineers. Although Line is a provider of communication tool, we still feel it is very important for the developers to actually see each other in person. So I think in the Line culture, there's lots of traveling done. Of course, there's this work business travel, but this picture shows a workshop situation. Periodically, the engineers who work in different countries meet up periodically to discuss. And at times, we have recreational activities together. That happens quite frequently. But at the end of the day, they're all engineers, so code becomes a common language, and development done in different locations, different geographies, we learned that that is very much possible. So working in different offices, what the offices look like. each office aren't that different, but the newest office is in Japan Line Fukuoka office. Fukuoka wasn't, so we couldn't find good locations. So in Fukuoka, we had 3 different offices. So the efficiency was not that great. So in May of this year, we aggregated the 5 offices into one. And in a building which is directly linked to Hakata Station. So since it's right next to Hakata Station, so from Hikarie Shibuya office, we can even go without being becoming wet with rain. So business trip has become much easier. So location-wise, we found a great office. And also within the office, these people standing are not made to stand. They are standing on a voluntary basis. Because if people remain seated for such a long time, the back starts to ache. So we have desks where you can choose whether you want to stand or sit. And the desks, there are multiple types of chairs, and employees can select the type of chair that they prefer the most. Also, engineers love the works of O'Reilly. So we purchased all his books. So we have built up this O'Reilly library, and I hope that our people get stimulated by that. So Fukuoka's environment is becoming very good, and I think the people are working. They're having a very good time working, and these offices are also being posted on the engineer blog. Not only Fukuoka, but Tokyo office is planned to relocate. In 2017, we will be moving from Hikarie to Mirai Tower in Shinjuku because we will be having more people. So to accommodate many people, and also this new location is very convenient, very close, actually linked to Shinjuku Station. So what I want to say is that LINE's basic policy is to really put emphasis on good locations and making use of PC smartphones to give the developers a great environment to work so that they can exert their power and creativity. So I think that is very important. So as I have been speaking, LINE operates in multiple locations, multiple countries. Many engineers work in many countries. In each country, and depending on the area of development, some people work on the front end while others work for the back end service. And the technologies which are used are also quite different from each other. But even so, there's what is common between LINE developers. We have this common developer culture, which we believe we have. However, development culture, when I think that is a big keyword. However, it is also very tricky because senior executives like myself, even if we think and want to build up this culture, this is not something that can be created immediately. So you have to do our daily business and go through many trials and errors. And some initiatives might result in a failure. And by doing so, by continuing to do so, what is put together, I think, ends up as a culture.
So what I'm going to talk about today is not that something in which was dictated by somebody else, but rather what I'm going to talk about is a reflection of on how line engineers work in their day-to-day working life. So to talk about engineering culture at line, we have some guiding principle, and we have 3 keywords for that. Take ownership and take a risk and be open. So I know these are the English keyword. We have engineers in a lot of different countries, so that's why we decided to set this 3 keywords in English. So allow me to explain one by one, and the first one is the take ownership. So as this expression speaks for itself, we don't micromanage engineers, so we respect that autonomy in the hands of engineers. But at the same time, we're not really asking the engineer to do everything on their own, so that's not what we're saying. Software development should be carried out by the group of teams, and the team members have a different kind of background, so that we encourage the engineer to tap into the resource, but at the same time, each one of them have the sense of ownership. So one example, I know it's not the winter time, but around the Christmas time, you'll be able to see that you can see the snow falling on a line screen in the winter time. So that functionality wasn't developed out of the requirement from the managers or planning team. This feature was created spontaneously from iOS team, so that they said it's more fun to have some seasonal essence in it. So again, we value the ownership, so we like to give the sense of freedom to engineers. This next one is the take risks. Although we encourage the engineers to take a risk, we're not saying that they can take any kind of risk. So what we're trying to say here is that everything doesn't go smoothly every time. So especially when it comes to software development, I know that things happens which isn't expected originally. Sometimes you have to embrace the challenges without fearing the risk. Speaking of the software development risk, if you try to implement a new technology, they use the new language, it's tough and there's a risk. You won't be able to calculate the required resource. However, new technology is the one which can create the new values. So, I mean that therefore we have to be positive to embrace the risk. So, Line was created 5 years ago, that's 2011. In recollection, we focus our attention to an application development for PC or for web, but we decided to carry out a major transformation, so we switched the gear to develop the application for smartphones. Or that we decided to ride on the wave of the smartphone technology. So we, in a recollection, so I think we embraced a major risk back in that time. So we shouldn't be over afraid of the risk, but at the same time, we have to minimize the negative potential implications. So we'd like to have a small sprint of development and release the new functionality as soon as possible, and we can do some prototyping. So if there's some mistake, so that we can shift our direction nimbly. So this type of activity is required whenever we take a risk. And so next one is the be open. This has two meanings. The first one, and almost all of the source code internally, it's open to engineers who are not assigned to the project in question. And there's a lot of parameters related product, such as KPI, the number of attributors, so that engineers can access this information. It's important and for all of the team members to share this product goals, and at the same time, the second meaning of be open, we have to review the code every time, and also before the release, and also for in the middle of the development phase. And we value that activities. Listen to the feedback from colleagues is an important element, and we want our engineers to be open-minded. The one is that an open access to information, and the second is that open-minded approach is required. So that's what we mean by be open. So I talk about the three action principles. So of course, and there are certain mindset required. We often use the words trust and respect here in line. So, and it's, in order to comply with the three guiding principles, you have to have a trust and respect. Without trust, you won't be able to take ownership. Because of the trust, you can embrace the risk. Unless you respect your peers, you won't be able to be open-minded. So if you look at this diagram, again, that if you have a trust and a respect mindset, what kind of work you can do? So you can see, and we call it the self-directing work in the middles. Rather than based on the top-down approach, that all of the team are encouraged to take a bottom-up approach. So to further break it down, you do some planning and implement the technology and also review that, and then finally you can go into the production. So even you look at the condition in these three phases, and so that you have to take ownership and for design and also for the cost estimate, and also as a self-directed work, so you should be able to prioritize the work smoothly, so that can increase the accuracy of the estimate. And if necessary, you're encouraged to take a risk. And so for the open-minded, for the feedback from peers. So we encourage you to embrace the challenges, but at the same time that we encourage peer review. So we call it the positive peer pressure. if you look at the word pressure, that has some negative connotation. But I think there are some positive pressure you can take advantage of. So this positive pressure can empower that team members so that they can carry out the required task. And so let's say having your supervisor putting your pressure, but rather than that, to listen to the feedback from the peers during the code review. So more like a proactive pressure is the one desirable condition for our culture.
まあこういった感
So if you want to move forward like this, line is a company, so there is assessment. So personnel assessment, we have co-worker review, which the co-workers review each other. So managers actually, this might be misinterpreted, but some managers actually don't read codes. So getting assessment, technical assessment from supervisors who are not deeply involved in the project does not mean much. So we really put emphasis on assessment from co-workers who have been working very closely in the project with that person. So the role of the manager is to support that a very good development cycle is in place, and also put together and summarize the co-worker assessment and evaluation. And by continuing on this cycle, the trust between the organization, among the organization personnel, will become deeper, and the culture will be more mature. So lastly, I would like to talk about the direction of LINE's development team. Up till now, being very frank, when seen from external developers, especially maybe we were being quite secretive regarding disclosing information outside. We weren't intending to become secretive, but we were more putting more resources into securing service scalability. So we weren't able to use our time to communicate with outside. So maybe the public would think, LINE, we know LINE services, but we don't have any ideas who's developing these services and how. Maybe that is as a very frank and honest opinion of the public. And we feel that should not be the case. So that's why we are talking about open to public. So as we have discussed in today's talks, LINE will really open up the platform to external developers, such as bots. And also, we make high use of open source in our development. So we will continue to contribute to OSS, and we will contribute to middleware OSS and tools which were developed internally. So we want to be a more open development organization. So we intend to actively host events such as this one, as well as sponsors. And we try to accept invitations on speaking at events. For example, this is when we spoke in a GitHub's conference called GitHub Universe the other day. And regarding events hosted and sponsored by LINE, we will have a smaller event called Developer Meetup in Fukuoka, and this is happening quite periodically. And as announced in the keynote, we will be holding bot contests with prize up to 1 million, 10 million yen. And although this is an internal matter, we have launched an internal organization dedicated to external communications. So if you want to invite LINE to any study sessions or conferences, there is a contact point indicated in the leaflet which you have in hand, and I hope that you will notify us. So I hope that this Developer Day will become a good starting point where we can build up a good relationship with external developers, and so that LINE could become a more open developer organization. And I hope that you can really count on future developments of LINE development. So thank you very much for coming.